Can you tell something about the idea of port, or maybe the history, or not the history, like what's so special about port? You know, the region, the soils, the garage, all the things.
You're asking a person who, it's my religion, it's my passion, and for me, one of the greatest wines in the world is vintage port. It's an accident. It's like many of the great wine regions. It's the climate. Here we're right by the sea. Yet 100 kilometers where you were yesterday, there's a huge barrier between here and there. 1,400 meter high mountains. Serra do Marão, exactly right. And that keeps, here we have more rain than London. And there in the Douro, it drops by half. So we have this huge barrier which keeps the damp climate on this side and a very dry climate. Then we have this extraordinary soil, the schistous soil, this slaty soil, which is absolutely critical to these wines. And the third key component is these unique grape varieties. Nowhere else in the world do these grape varieties exist, apart from one, Roriz, which, as you know, is Tempranillo. Yeah. So Touriga Nacional, Touriga Franca, Barroca, Tinto Cão, Suzão, these are the grape varieties with the soil and the climate that make these incredibly concentrated wines.
If you see now in the picture, like from the Douro Valley, it's like, it's so amazing how men can work here. It's like very steep slopes, like everything have to do by hand, you know.
All by hand.
You have the patamares, which are done by
tractors,
but the working with the varieties is by hand. So it's very hot and very lonely region.
One of the most isolated regions on earth. I'm biased, of course, because it's my home, but I think it's one of the most beautiful wine growing areas in the world. I mean, the beauty is stunning. Even if you're not interested in wine, you should visit the Douro. It's so beautiful, and it's got a stunning natural beauty, as you say, very isolated. And we have some of the lowest yields of any major wine region in the world. I mean, we get 22 hectares per hectare. 22. Bordeaux, 50. Champagne, 100. So, I mean, we get incredibly low yields per vine. And as you rightly say, very steep vineyards. It's a tough place to work. Very cold winters, blistering hot summers. But the vines we have are adapted to this climate. We had some Australians here the other day who were measuring the ripeness of varieties in very hot weather. Touriga Nacional, completely off the scale. And even people like Max Chapoutier recently have been saying, in the south of France we have the wrong grape variety. Instead of irrigating, we should plant Touriga Nacional. And he referred to Touriga Nacional. So our grape varieties in the Douro have learnt to adapt to temperatures of 37, 38 degrees in the shade and bitterly cold winters, and still ripen the fruit in a balanced way. And out of this harsh conditions come these incredible wines, vintage port, which have earned their place in across the world as one of the great wines.
So the vintage is the flagship.
It is.
It's the point, the peak of port wines,
It's the pinnacle, and we only make a vintage in the very best years, where the climate is kind to us, and certain conditions have to be followed. A good wet winter, a dry flowering in May right now is an important time. And then a good ripening season without excessive heat, and that doesn't always happen. Sometimes we have summers that are too hot. Sometimes we have no rain at all, and we have raisoning occurring in the vineyards. So normally over the last 50 to 100 years, a great vintage we make maybe 2, maybe 3 times every 10 years. Only when God is very kind to us.
Like 2007, declared.
Like 2007.
My son was born in 2007, so...
You should have a few bottles.
So we start with the first one. It's the 2007, hold it here in the camera, the Graham's, right? Vintage port. So you have a dilemma that the fermentation is quite short for vintage port. So back in the days, you had to use the lagares, right? Where everybody knows the picture, like 30 people in a pool, having a good time, like trading, really hard work the whole day, and you start to change a little bit.
We believe that making port in lagage is the finest way of making port, for the reason that you just mentioned. We have a short we have a short fermentation. Why? Because we want to keep the natural grape sugar in the wine. Yeah. So we pick the grapes, and the fermentation, we stop the fermentation after 3 days. And in that time, we have to get the best color extraction we possibly can. So we need to tread, because your foot, my foot, is a good way of squeezing the skins against the granite floor without breaking the pips. Okay. So the human foot is a perfect way of getting the color out. And look at the immense color in this wine. And so we have to get that out. If you're making a red wine, the fermentation is what, 2 weeks? Yeah. And so you have plenty of time to mix the skins and the juice. Here we only have 3 days. So we tread the grapes with our feet. But you're quite right. In 1998, we introduced for the first time an experimental machine which does what you and I would do with our feet. And it just presses the skins very gently on the bottom of a stainless steel tank. Yeah. And we get the same color out of the lagage and in the wine. So, but we're not saying that the machine treads just like a human foot. It's very difficult to get 40 people to tread. And that's the reason.
Which temperature you would like to recommend to drink vintage port?
I think room temperature. If on a very warm day, very occasionally, I chill it very slightly, but not normally the case.
Or what means room temperature for you? 16 degrees?
16, 17 degrees, yeah.
And we are tasting the ports now from red wine glasses, because usually a lot of people that use this, tasting glass. You think it's the wrong glass?
I do.
You do?
I do. I have a terrible problem with, I think port is too often served in a very small glass. This we use in the tasting room because we do a lot of our work when we're blending. We do it a lot with the color and the nose, and we only taste at the end of all the work in the morning. And so this for a professional is fine, because you can get the wine really, you can see the color against the light, and also it concentrates the aroma. But these wines are so generous, they give so much. I love to see vintage port served in big glasses. We have a huge problem. Many top restaurants around the world serve port in silly little glasses. I hate them. I quite often in a restaurant, I pour my port into a white wine glass. Okay. The sommelier looks at me as if I'm crazy. And I say, you taste it now. And then they understand.
You have very super fragrant, super aromas. It's like you have this... more like this mulberries, blackcurrant, of course.
Yeah, blackcurrant.
But a lot of peppery also, like minty.
Mint, yeah. And a little bit of eucalyptus.
Yeah, eucalyptus, right.
And you probably saw in the Douro yesterday, we have this flower called the gum cistus, Esteva in Portuguese. And in these wines, in the young wines, we find this Esteva, gum cistus smell. It's eucalyptus-like, and it's the minty one that you were recognizing. Okay. That's the slightly minty flavor that comes.
And a good, of course, minerality. It comes from the schist. So
Piero, when we're tasting these wines, when they're very young, straight from the barrel, we're looking for what we call violet, the smell of blue violets, the smell of a perfect little flower called a blue violet. And it comes from Touriga Nacional primarily. And when we are selecting barrel by barrel, me and my cousins, we say violets on this wine. And then we know we have something good. And the smell of violets, it gradually, it's beginning to change in this wine. And with age in the bottle, it comes to cinnamon. The blue violets emerges into a cinnamon. I hope we'll find it on the 80 when we come to taste it. It's the slight cinnamon flavors that they seem to start life with as violets, and they come over many years in the bottle rather, to cinnamon.
So after the wine is fermented in the short fermentation
in the lagage,
it stays. The wine will be pressed or comes in a big pipache. Or tonneau.
Yeah, a tunnel, yeah.
It stays there until February.
For the cold weather to do its job.
Okay, back in the days, was the big excitement moment, and you shipped all the barrels, and you keep bringing here of the other side from Porto to Vila Nova de Gaia, and the wines can develop there with a cooler temperature.
Exactly.
in the in this
because
suburb.
the Douro summer is so hot, as we were mentioning earlier, that heat, if you have the wine there in the barrels, it gets too warm.
Yeah.
If you put it high up today, it's okay, but in the old days it could only stay down by there. So we want the cold weather to do what its job. It's in English it's called falling bright.
Okay.
The wine is cloudy when it comes from the lagars. We put them in the big barricas, the big barrels, the peepers, and we wait for the cold weather. So only in February, March would we bring it down here. So, and when we draw the wine off very carefully above the sediment, and then it comes down here, as you rightly say, much cooler. We're on the Atlantic coast here, so we have a moderate climate. Not too hot in the summer, not too cold in the winter. Because we want this. This spends a relatively short time in barrel, only seasoned oak, not new oak.
Okay.
And we bottle this about 18 months to 2 years after the harvest. But after a very careful selection process. My reputation, personally, and of my brother and my cousins, is in this wine. If I bottle a vintage port, as I mentioned earlier, only 2 or 3 times every 10 years, if I make a mess of this wine, and in 20 years' time, this is not what I think it is, my reputation is finished. So we are saying to people, invest in this wine when it's young. This will be a great wine in 20 years' time. So that's why we only do it 2 or 3 times every 10 years. We want to be so sure that we have one of the great wines in the glass.
Mm. Mm. This is an explosion.
It's an explosion.
Of aromas, minerality. It's like pepper. Yeah, it's like incredible. It's like, wow.
Piero, this is why this wine is classified next to the greatest wines of Germany, the greatest wines of Bordeaux, the greatest wines of anywhere. The concentration in this wine is a mind-blowing experience.
Yeah, and the sweetness. Okay, this is the sweetness, but it's not like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's boring sweetness.
No. If it was sweetness, then you might as well just eat some chocolate. A great vintage port must have acidity and tannins to balance it out. And what I love about even me, we taste these wines a lot. The initial hit is incredible explosion of fruit, and then as your tongue and your mouth begins to taste, you taste pepper. Yeah. And bitter chocolate and other flavors come through. So the initial power is extraordinary. But what I love is when you spit the out or you swallow, you get a tingling right across your tongue.
Yeah.
And that's the tannins. And that's what we call, when we're tasting in our tasting room, we say grip. Has this wine got grip? Grip is the backbone that will give you the aging through there. But you're quite right, Piero. If this was just about sweetness, you wouldn't want a second glass.
Okay. What do you recommend the port? Like, how do you consume yourself the port, like a vintage? It's just like in the evening, having a cigar, or...
I drink vintage port. Tonight I go to have dinner with my father, who's 86 next month. In a few weeks' time, 13th of May is his birthday. And he's going to be 86. We worked out the other day how much port he drank. He had Easter with me, and every day he has a small glass of port after lunch and after dinner, all his life, since he came back in 1948 from school in England. And I worked out that it was more or less 1,300 cases he must have drunk. And he often drinks vintage port. And I have to say I don't drink port normally at lunchtime unless I'm in the tasting room. But this is a wine that you could have with friends, with a cigar, or just watching a good movie on your TV, or because it's such a pleasure, and especially in a glass like this.
So, the 2007 vintage, I can recommend. It's like 97, 98 points wine. Is spectacular. It's amazing how wine can be like this. It's beautiful, really.